Cambridge Muslim College, training the next generation of Muslim thinkers.
So good morning all, and thank you very much for joining this session on AI, artificial intelligence, as an example of how science intersects with religion. So there's a lot to go through, so I will try to press through as quickly as possible, covering a lot of areas. So keep in mind any areas which you want to return to in the question and answers, and I'll try to elaborate on them there. So after some brief introduction, I will provide an overview of Islam and science before diving into the main topic of AI. I'll then talk about some of the intersections of science and religion in the case of AI. First, where science becomes science fiction. Second, how science may be guided by underlying metaphysical research programs. And finally, developments in conceptions of human intelligence and how these are being informed by the latest research in AI. So I'll be speaking in my capacity as a research fellow in religion and science. So my background is actually in experimental physics and electronic engineering before that. So you may ask, how does physics relate to AI? So it turns out that a background in physics is actually quite well suited to understanding the fundamentals of modern artificial intelligence, which involve things like linear algebra, calculus, probability, and statistics. To begin with, there is a common sense understanding of life giving rise to consciousness, and then intelligence being a part of consciousness. Now, attempting to define intelligence is a tremendously difficult philosophical challenge. So an alternative way to begin is by considering the different types of intelligence that exist. So the types of intelligence, like a space of intelligence, so you have biological, natural intelligence, animal and insect intelligence, human intelligence, and then this new area of the area which is trying to develop, which is artificial or machine intelligence. And in this area, there are different categories. So you might have a weak form or narrow form or a strong form of artificial intelligence. We'll talk a bit more about what that means in a bit. So before beginning, I'd like to show that AI is a very vast topic with many different interconnected perspectives depending on who is looking at it. So for example, AI for scientists and engineers, you have different people from many different fields, computer scientists, physicists, cognitive scientists, neuroscientists, and nowadays roboticists also getting involved in AI research. Then also philosophers and theologians might be concerned with issues of philosophy of mind, consciousness, morality, ethics, legislators, politicians, business people, all interested in ethics, trust, transparency, AI safety. People are looking towards a new industrial revolution in pretty much every sector. And then another area is the futurologists or singularitarians, as they're known, where people start talking about transhumanism, superintelligence, existential risks of artificial intelligence, and ideas about whole brain emulation. Of course, these are non-exhaustive lists, just to give you an overview that this is a very vast space, many different perspectives, many different aspects. So my work really covers these two areas, science and the philosophical, theological angles. But all of these are really very highly interconnected. So AI safety feeds into, or work on AI safety is really based around worrying about the prospect of superintelligence emerging. Then neuroscience provides inspiration for whole brain emulation, and then ethics. So again, you can keep on building up all these links, because, for example, in the space of ethics, nowadays computer scientists are having to build in some kind of safety or legal frameworks into the systems themselves in order for the AI to operate safely in human environments. So there are many interconnected links in this area. So when I refer to AI, I intend its broadest context, which includes the mutual interaction with diverse fields such as cognitive science, neuroscience, and philosophy of mind. So the link between the idea of artificial intelligence systems and religion was noted from the early roots of AI in the form of the cybernetics movement. The originator of cybernetics entitled one of his books, God and Golem, a comment on certain points where cybernetics impinges on religion, where he discussed issues such as life and creation and the place of machines in society. The word cybernetics itself signifies control, mastery, and governance. Since then, there have been successive waves of interest in different approaches to AI, such as the symbolic logic approach of the 60s and 70s, which gave way to neural networks in the 80s. By the 90s, the field went out of favor with funding agencies for frequently under-delivering on its promises. However, in 1996, IBM developed a chess-playing supercomputer that was able to defeat chess grandmaster Garry Kasparov. However, this was not strictly speaking an example of AI, since a brute force method of calculation was used to decide the next best move. So the supercomputer was evaluating 200 million positions per second, far in advance of what the human opponent could work out, so it defeated it. So it's not an example of AI, it's just an example of brute force calculation. However, in 2012, a type of neural network known as a convolutional neural network named AlexNet showed groundbreaking performance in a visual recognition challenge, which was a key trigger in the revival of interest in AI research. As the name suggests, a neural network comes from trying to understand the behavior of neurons in the brain and how they are connected in enormous networks. So this is the idea of a network. Each of these circles represents a neuron, and they're connected up by sight. We'll explain that in a bit more detail. And this is an example of what this type of network is doing. It's able to do object recognition in real time on this moving scene. So you can see the probability of matching between different categories of object. So to very briefly illustrate the idea of a neural network in AI, we begin by considering a neuron as representing a mathematical function with inputs and outputs. The connections between biological neurons are known as synapses. So when you have two neurons together, you have a synapse. So the idea carries over to artificial neural networks as well, where the synapses are the links between neurons in different layers of a network. So when people talk about deep learning, for example, it's one of the buzzwords which you might have come across, they're talking about having more of these many more of these layers of neurons, hidden layers they're called. So within the network, knowledge and information are encoded in patterns of activation throughout the neural network, as illustrated in these short clips of a brain simulation on the top and an artificial neural network for number recognition. Here you can see different layers contain higher level abstractions of the input. So this is the input. There's the number which the network is trying to recognize, and then it's selecting between what number it thinks has been written in the input. And so if I skip forward in this clip here, you'll be able to see. So as I say, it's only an inspiration from the neuroscience level, but there are these patterns of activation which record knowledge and information. So that's just a very sort of visual perspective of what's going on there. The next major trigger came in 2015 when an AI named AlphaGo was trained to play the board game of Go. So a short clip. So it was a very significant historical event, and they even made a film about it. This is a short clip from the film introducing the game.
Your goal is to create a linked group of your stones that surrounds some empty territory. And when you surround enemy stones, you capture them and remove them from the board. You earn points by surrounding territory, and at the end of the game, the person with the most territory wins. It seems really simple, but then you sit down to play and you realize right away, it's like, well, I technically know what I'm allowed to do, but I have no clue what I should do.
Go is incredibly challenging for computers to tackle because compared to, say, chess, the number of possible moves in a position is much larger. In chess, it's about 20. In Go, it's about 200. And the number of possible configurations of the board is more than the number of atoms in the universe. So even if you took all the computers in the world and ran them for 1 million years, that wouldn't be enough compute power to calculate all the possible variations.
Okay, so for the first time in history, a machine defeated one of the highest-ranking Go players in the world, which was an achievement thought to be decades away. The surprising result of the AlphaGo game was that the AI algorithm played moves that completely astonished its opponent, and expert players analyzing the game. The AI system actually uncovered a strategy unknown to human players in the game's 2,000-year history, leading many to speculate whether this was a rudimentary form of creativity in machines. The victory was a major step in renewing interest in pursuing AI, or artificial general intelligence, I mean. Hence, the impact of AlphaGo games produced an explosion of activity in the field of AI, quite unlike previous decades, since it is now supported by several key factors, such as the availability of big data and computational power. AI systems now surpass human performance by orders of magnitude in an increasing number of tasks. So a more tangible example of an AI agent learning to play an Atari game from scratch is demonstrated here, where the system only has access to the controls and is instructed to maximize the score at the top. So this was actually a pivotal demonstration in terms of generating interest in artificial general intelligence. So again, the network I showed earlier is being trained to play this game and work out the best pattern of moves to maximize the score at the top. So you can see it's improving its performance. You know, it's not missing the ball anymore. Right, so you can see it worked out a completely new strategy there. And actually, it's quite often the designers of this algorithm, it's been said that they actually didn't know this strategy themselves. So the AI was teaching them how to play and maximize their own performance. So some of you may also be familiar with Sophia, the first robotic citizen. So AI alongside robotics, which used to be a separate field entirely, is now being taken very seriously from numerous quarters, with many anticipating a new industrial revolution. Robotics, which was previously considered an independent discipline, is now becoming united with AI research. Sophia here is an example of an AI robot that combines computer vision, facial recognition, voice recognition with natural language processing. So this is her from a less common perspective, where you can see the internal wiring. So as I say, robotics has really come into the sphere of AI as well. So let's say a few more demonstrations of progress on robot locomotion. So this is really tremendous success in a very difficult problem, the locomotion problem. So you can see very natural movements to start with, but also sort of this cooperative behavior as well. So one further clip on that. So whether or not it'll be wise to provoke the machines in the future is not quite known yet, but okay. So let's just see him get through it. There we go, and it's happy now. Okay. So this has led to widespread public discourse on the ethical, political, societal and philosophical implications of AI. AI has become a familiar trope in films, television and literature. There's even been a new wave of films on AI for a new generation, such as 2013's Her, which was based around human-AI companionship, 2014's Transcendence, that explores the idea of uploading consciousness and mind control, 2015's Ex Machina, that explores consciousness in an intelligent human-like robot. Well, that was 2017's Circle, which explores privacy, surveillance and freedom. And finally, a new Blade Runner that continues to explore what it means to be human. So many will have watched series such as Black Mirror, which explores existential questions such as the idea of virtual worlds, transhumanism, consciousness uploading and dystopian visions of the future. Since the work of scientists has become a relatively unreflective, narrow, hyper-specialized activity, this recourse to science fiction storytelling provides a window into the future and aids in reflection on the impacts of science and technology and on society and ourselves. What science fiction shows us is that technology has been developing and changing society far more rapidly than the legal, ethical, philosophical and theological context can be understood. And unfortunately, the case is far more acute for Muslims since there's a tremendous gulf between Islamic discourse and developments in science and technology. In many ways, science has been in the ascendancy and theology has been in retreat, since the rapid pace of development has meant that by the time religious scholars have realized there may be deep issues to address, entire paradigms of discourse have been transformed. The scientific view of nature itself is often regarded as absolute and the only valid way of viewing nature, while the products of science and technology that pervade every facet of daily life are wielded as powerful arguments in support of such views, which seek to to make religion innocuous and create the disenchantment of the world. There's widespread hope that technology will reconstruct the natural world from the destruction it has itself produced by chains of unintended consequences. However, such unintended consequences are explicitly sought after in a growing number of fields that adopt a bottom-up approach towards developing complex systems that exhibit unspecified and unplanned emergent properties. At these points, methodology veers into metaphysics, with the belief that science will inevitably solve the remaining mysteries of the universe, decrypt the mystery of the mind, and replenish the biome. In the words of philosopher Dupuy, society is counting on technology to rescue us from the very impasse into which it has led us. So scientists and non-scientists put great hope in the explanatory power of science, even for questions that cannot be addressed empirically, such as questions on the origins of life, the nature of life, consciousness and intelligence. For the person of faith, discovery leads to evidence of the power of God and the realization of ultimate truth, whereas for scientists, discovery is a demonstration of the power of the human mind and intelligence, which brings us to the topic of how did intelligence arise in the universe. So the question of where the modern concept of the mind came from has deep roots stretching back over 400 years of Western philosophy. In the book Soul Machine, George Macquarie shows that the concept of the mind was constructed over several centuries from Hobbes' invention of automata, Cartesian dualism with the bifurcation of body and mind, and later on Locke's thinking matter. The common sense understanding of the mind that we have today is actually inherited from this philosophical deconstruction. Prior to this, these functions such as intellect, thought, memory, reasoning, understanding were attributed to the soul itself. Hence, the invention of the mind represented the undoing of the unifying link between nature, man, and God, in the words of Macquarie. Now, defining intelligence is again a profoundly difficult philosophical question, and many AI researchers simply define it as the ability to accomplish complex goals. In this case, different types of AI may be classified by their scope, from narrow AI systems, which only perform well on tasks they have been designed for, to strong AI systems, which are able to generalize to other types of problem beyond the scope of their design. So the examples which I showed you previously, they would still be categorized as narrow or weak AI systems. So much of the technical and engineering research in AI is aimed at developing applications within a narrow context, such as vision, speech, or language processing, or integrating AI modules for more complex tasks, such as autonomous driving. So here's a good overview video of all of the different modular areas which come together for a driving system. So you can see augmented reality there, identifying the object. Augmented reality, again, overlaying useful views over the actual road. Different types of detection of the environment. So you can see the AI is working out the path to follow on the road. Again, deep learning perception, identifying all of the objects and obstructions and so on. Number plates recognition. You can see how this is all taking place in real time. How much processing these systems are able to perform. Facial recognition, and so on. So there have also been fascinating examples of creative output from neural networks. So here's an example of a type of neural network replicating famous artists. So on the input side, you have the resolution not very clear here, but those are just the original photographs, and then here each column here is then the AI trying to imitate the style of a particular artist. So AI can also produce its own artwork. So you can see this is an output from a neural network. The holy grail of AI research, though, is to create what is known as artificial general intelligence, with the motto of DeepMind, who created AlphaGo, being solve intelligence and use that to solve everything else, meaning that the goal is to offload the intellectual tasks of research from humans to machines, which can process data on a far more rapid and larger scale. Another issue in understanding intelligence is its relation to the concepts of life and consciousness. Again, from the common sense perspective, consciousness comes before intelligence. However, developments in AI and the success of complex neural networks and complex tasks, such as vision, speech, language, and so on, are leading many to consider whether advances in AI will lead to AI systems that are considered conscious beings themselves. So how do these developments relate to the Islamic conception of intelligence? From a religious perspective, intelligence has both a material and spiritual dimension. It is the faculty that distinguishes mankind from the rest of creation, and a divine secret that is attributed to the soul that was created before the body and will continue after it perishes. Another way to consider intelligence is to ask what it is for. From a scientific perspective, it is a product of evolution that enhances survival. Whereas from a religious perspective, the intellect is essential in belief in the existence of God. A sound intellect is prerequisite for legal responsibility, and revelation frequently urges mankind to use the intellect in contemplation, thought, reflection, investigation, and so on. The centrality of the intellect in Islam led many Muslim theologians and philosophers to develop detailed psychological theories within their works, such as Ibn Sina, Imam al-Ghazali, and Imam al-Razi, rahimahumullah. For centuries, Muslim scholars discussed issues of free will, agency, knowledge, logic, and reasoning, the nature of perception, mental representation, and imagination, all of which will be discussed in more detail at the 2018 CMC Science and Religion Conference on Intelligence and Consciousness. So in the last part of the talk, I'd like to summarize the three levels of intersection I mentioned between AI and religion. First are the direct intersections in two areas. First, moral and ethical issues of AI, and then the case where science becomes the basis for new religious beliefs. So the key areas of ethics include the problem of human bias in AI training data, the legal responsibility for the activity of AI systems in human environments in cases of accidents or fatalities, issues of trust and transparency in how AI systems work. But there's another area surrounding the malicious use of AI that came into sharp focus in the past 2 weeks when new revelations came to light about the role of PsyOps firm Cambridge Analytica in wide-scale social manipulation that is likely to have swung the 2016 US elections. So machine learning and AI were really key to their ability to manipulate people's views. So also this type of use of AI is also found in more mundane areas such as persuasive use of technology which is integral to user interface design, computational propaganda, social media bots, and then Cambridge Analytica, who actually, as I say, deployed military-level psychographics for micro-targeting, nudging, so-called, and behavioral modification. So in the same way that the machine learning and AI algorithms I showed you earlier were trained to, exploit the game environment, here Cambridge Analytica were using machine learning to exploit people's psychology. As the person mentioned, 30 to 40,000 iterations of different types of layout until it got what was your particular preference. So the story really represents a fascinating web of intrigue and conspiracy that eliminates any lingering notion that we live in free and fair democracies. It's an incredible example of how AI may be used to characterize human traits and personalities, then exploit their traits to nudge them towards changes of behavior. It's a case of super propaganda and social manipulation on an unprecedented scale. So of course all these fears can be laid to rest since everyone is now, since they've heard this news, they've been deleting their Facebook accounts, piercing filter bubbles and opening the door of their echo chambers, if that's right or not. So just to really drive the point home, this is the whistleblower from the past 2 weeks, and pay attention to the wording that he uses in describing what they were doing.
Harvested my data, and then you've used that to target me in ways that I can't see and that I don't understand.
Yeah, so we would know what kinds of messaging you would be susceptible to, including the framing of it, the topics, the contents, the tone, whether it's scary or not, that kind of thing. So what you would be susceptible to and where you're going to consume that. And then how many times do we need to touch you with that in order to change how you think about something? In addition to having, data scientists and psychologists and strategists, they also have an entire team of, creatives, designers, videographers, photographers. They then create that content. That gets then sent to a targeting team, which then, injects it into the internet. Websites will be created, blogs will be created, whatever it is that we think this target profile will be receptive to, we will create content on the internet for them to find. And then they see that and they click it and they go down the rabbit hole until they start to think that, until they start to think something differently. Yeah. Instead of standing in the public square and saying what you think and then letting people come and listen to you and have that shared experience as to what your narrative is, you are whispering into the ear of each and every voter, and you may be whispering one thing to this voter and another thing to another voter.
So, this is not a non-Muslim, but I found it really fascinating, the sort of language he was using. First he said that they were touching, so it reminded me of this verse from the Quran, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that when an impulse touches them from the shaitan, they remember him and at once have insight. And also whispering, which we all know and recite every day. So just not a solid connection, just something that came to my mind about the way he was talking about this. So then again, propaganda has a new dimension as well in terms of video manipulation and fake image. This again is generated by a neural network that's similar to what I showed you earlier. Can anyone tell me which one is the true version, daytime or nighttime? So the second type of direct intersection is when scientific ideas are misappropriated for metaphysical narratives for humanity. For example, Yuval Harari, in his book Homo Deus, writes about the reconceptualization of humans as biological algorithms, the idea of humans advancing to a new stage of evolution in transhumanism, and the idea of humans thinking of themselves as gods. And then the singularity of machine and human intelligence through whole brain emulation and uploading consciousness. So this short clip is an example of how advanced prosthetic technologies have become.
What he's testing here being the Johns Hopkins Applied Physics Laboratory, is a glimpse into the future of how humans and machines interact. It's a mind-controlled arm that attaches directly to his skeleton. And it's the result of a decade of work and $120 million of military funding.
So this is the first time that we're attaching a prosthetic device to an implant that protrudes out of his skin and allows the prosthesis to actually be physically attached to his skeleton.
Okay, elbow extend, elbow bend. I had a problem with all the arms that I was working with. I was having skin breakdown on my stump. With osseointegration, you don't have to worry about the suction on the stump. You connect directly to the implant, and so therefore, you can continue wearing it, no matter what.
Johnny's implant allows for more strength and mobility, but maybe more impressive is he can control the arm with his thoughts. For this, he had to undergo another surgery to rearrange the nerves from his missing arm.
All right, so we'll just start with no movement. Ready? Let's pronate. Supinate. Go.
We are actually witnessing something that has never been done before, is Johnny really controlling that limb simply by thinking about it with normal intuitive thought. We are using wireless myobands to transmit that muscle activity. So now when he thinks of moving his missing limb, it now contracts those newly reinnervated muscles.
Elbow flexion, ready, and go. Hand open, and go. Wrist rotate in, and go. Ready, and go, and go, and go.
So this clip really illustrates the remarkable potential of advanced prosthetics to rehabilitate people suffering from severe accidents. However, will the time come when some people will choose to augment themselves voluntarily in the name of transhumanism? Views that represent new types of faith based on science and technology are no longer at the fringes and motivate a growing number of scientists, engineers, and technologists who wield an increasing amount of economic and political power. Recently, a new religion of artificial intelligence known as Way of the Future was established for the realization, acceptance, and worship of a Godhead based on AI. The founder of this group was integral to the development of the Google self-driving car and its technical lead. Others, such as Ray Kurzweil, are well known for their views on technological singularity and seeking immortality or longevity escape velocity through technology. On this level, technoscience becomes a religious worldview comprising a comprehensive origin, past, present, and future narrative of mankind, or in other words, a cosmogony, mythology, ideology, and eschatology about mankind and the universe. While we recognize these views are far removed from the everyday work of a scientist doing lab experiments, collecting data and doing analysis and publishing findings, there's an intermediate level of intersection in the area of worldviews, the goals of science and its values. One of the ideas underlying a science-based worldview is the convergence of nanotechnology, biotechnology, information technology, and cognitive science, which is known as MBIC convergence. One of the key architects of MBIC heads a research division at the US National Science Foundation and has managed government research grants in AI, human-computer interaction, and informatics. He also happens to be a leading proponent of transhumanism and advocates new forms of quasi-religion for modernity. Hence, the idea is deeply embedded with metaphysical ambitions to advance humanity to a new stage of evolution. Now, there's a misunderstanding that Muslims in antiquity had the same motivations, values, and goals as in the modern age in relation to their work on science and technology. The most relevant example in connection with AI and algorithms is Muhammad ibn Musa al-Khwarizmi, who developed algebra in the 9th century. The word algorithm itself is directly taken from the Latinization of his name as algorithmus. While the modern meaning of algorithm developed in the 19th century, it is worth asking why al-Khwarizmi was interested in mathematics. In his case, al-Khwarizmi sought to aid scholars in calculating inheritance. He wanted to help protect individual dignity through the right to inherit property and wealth. Whereas the modern world, in contrast, has a type of disinheritance of more and more people of any type of ownership in the first place, with financial loans, rental models, subscriptions of property and goods and services. So I would even go so far as to say that modernity does not just eliminate inheritable ownership, but it disinherits people of their very souls by reconceiving of biological life as algorithmic processes based on complex biochemical interactions. Hence, the final level of intersection, and in my view the most critical, is on the level of beliefs about human nature. In this case, scientific reductionism leads to viewing intelligence and higher order mental activity as mere biochemical processes and complex behavior of neural networks, eroding belief in any concept of a non-physical dimension to human beings. So before ending, and having shown you some of the more impressive examples of AI technologies, it's worthwhile being aware of some of the limitations of existing systems. First is an example of what is known as reward hacking. Here the system again has been asked to maximize a score, and the ordinary way of doing this is to follow the course around. Any sort of human player would realize that this is a race course and you need to follow the actual course. But here, the system has worked out that the best strategy to maximize the score is just to stay in this small central area and keep on circling around and picking up the points from these green balloons or something. So this is known as reward hacking. Another type of limitation is in object identification. So here, the neural network, because it's very common to have pictures of people holding dogs or small pets. So the neural network has become used to categorizing this type of image as a person holding a dog in his hands. Whereas, it's clearly, these are clearly two sheep or two lambs being held. So here's another example of the same problem. Here, sheep in the field are a group of orange flowers in a field. So another type of limitation is what's known as an adversarial attack. So here we have two images, and does anyone want to have a go at identifying what's in these two images? What's everyone seeing here? Parrots on the left and parrot on the right? Is that acceptable? So an adversarial attack basically applies this noise signal to the base image. So it's gone from being a macaw to being a bookcase. So it's really so this imperceptible noise signal has confused the system. So our loquacious friend, even though he talks a lot, he's not actually a bookcase. He's still a parrot. Another example of limitations from a few. So recently, actually, there have been quite a few examples of this autonomous driving fatalities and accidents. But this is one of the early examples where this lorry was driving across on the top of a hill, and the autonomous car was coming up the road. But what happened was that there was no contrast between the side of the lorry, the white side, and the cloudy background. So the system was not able to distinguish that there was actually an object, an obstruction, and it collided directly into the side of the lorry. And again, you might have seen the example of the recent Uber fatality, and again, there was another Tesla accident as well. So, to conclude, achievements in the field of AI are worthy of admiration when considered just from the perspective of science and technology, or as a tool for accomplishing complex goals. AI systems produce fascinating results and have immense potential to produce benefits for people living in advanced technological societies. However, I have drawn attention to the fact that AI research programs are inadvertently undertaking to assert the mind to be a mere machine. In the words of philosopher Dupuy, the aim of this distinctively metaphysical program is to place humankind in the position of being divine maker of the world, as demiurge, while at the same time condemning human beings to see themselves as out of date. And finally, a quote from psychologist Paul Bloom from 2004. The great conflict between science and religion in the last century was over evolutionary biology. In this century, it will be over psychology, and the stakes are nothing less than our souls. So thank you very much.
Cambridge Muslim College, training the next generation of Muslim thinkers.